Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the webinar. This is the third webinar of our Fall into Cash September event. I'm very excited to be joined by our guest, Patrick.Casale of Casale Coaching today. We're going to be talking all about, overcoming the barriers to starting a private practice. And Patrick's going to be offering up his expert advice. We're going to be taking a lot of questions throughout the webinar. So the way that these webinars, I find are the most successful and provide the best advice are questions from all of you in the audience. So I encourage you to ask questions as we go. A couple of housekeeping things before we begin. If you are having trouble seeing or hearing the webinar, Natalie from the Brighter Vision marketing team here has put a link to our FAQs page for Demio, which is the software we're using for this event. So click that link if you are having trouble seeing or hearing the event, and you should be able to find a quick and easy solution there. To start things off, I also want to point out the chat area, and this is where you can type questions that you want Patrick or myself to answer. So maybe to just start off, if everybody could type in where they're tuning in from, that would be awesome. I just put here that I'm joining us from Denver. Now, actually, it looks like sunny Denver. It's been snowing the past couple of days, but it looks like the sun is finally peeking through and our wildfires are gone here, which is nice. So look, wow, all over
the
even in
world.
India. That's awesome. Yeah, love to see when international people are able to join. South Carolina, Canada, Annapolis, awesome.
Very cool.
Fantastic. So to
Philippines.
introduce, yeah, that's so cool. So to introduce our guest here today, so Patrick.Casale has been working in the mental health community for over 12 years. And for the past 2 years, he's worked full-time as a private practice therapist, has continued to grow his own business while helping other therapists in the area do the same. He has a passion for coaching, encouraging other health professionals to achieve their dreams, and connecting people to helpful resources. Patrick is running 3 coaching courses in September. Those coaching courses start on the 13th, the 27th, and the 29th. As a special thank you for registering for this webinar, everybody can take advantage of $200 off any of these coaching courses that start on any of those dates. We'll be sending emails about that in the follow-up email, but you can also check out information for the course here. I put a link to that in the chat. Also, as a part of Fall into Cash, Patrick is raffling off a free coaching package from Casale Coaching and Consulting. This includes 4 individual practice building coaching sessions and helps guide you and teach you how to move forward with processes and procedures in your private practice, amongst choosing a niche, developing a targeted marketing strategy, and other things. So you can enter to win that giveaway with the link that I just put in the chat, as well as look at all of our other Fall into Cash giveaways. Definitely encourage you to enter. A lot of great stuff this week. And, if you don't end up winning, you can take advantage of the $200 off. So, Patrick, so happy to have you with us today. Maybe you want to just take the floor and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Sam. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, everyone, for making time out of your day. I'm Patrick.Casale with Casale Coaching and Consulting. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I also own a private practice, Resilient Mind Counseling, in Asheville, North Carolina. I've been here for about 9 years. I think this October will be 10. I'm originally from upstate New York. I launched a coaching course and program in July, basically because I've been spending the last 2 years of my career in Asheville meeting with other therapists for lunch, for free, for coffee, to help them build their businesses. And people kept telling me, hey, you're pretty good at this. You should probably start marketing this and doing this to be able to help a wide range of people. And that's kind of what made this take off, was kind of COVID and being in home a lot and having a lot of free time to think about how to expand business and move into the virtual world.
Fantastic. So, yeah. So what we're going to be talking about today is, really, when you are beginning a private practice and looking at that as an option, it can seem overwhelming at times. And, you can say there's all of these barriers, creating a schedule, finding an office space, or, finding a telehealth platform if you're doing telehealth. And what we want to do today is just provide guidance to clinicians out there, whether you haven't started a private practice or you're in the early stages, we're here to give you advice. So one of the things that we will start off with is we had launched a poll a little bit, a poll already of what you think the biggest barrier to starting your private practice is. And if you just want to answer that poll, we will go ahead and begin answering some questions.
Absolutely. And I can already see some answers trickling in. A lot of people seemingly clicking on the how to get clients section of that. And
Yep.
Debbie, even Debbie chatting how to get clients. I wish there wasn't all of the above. Yeah.
So, and I think that's a great place to start. When we're talking about getting clients, a big step that people miss is choosing a niche. And a lot of times don't think that that's necessarily important. Something we talk about here at Brighter Vision is choosing your ideal client. Choosing your niche is really the same thing, just said in a slightly different way. So,
Definitely.
Patrick, maybe you could start off by telling us about, why it's important to choose a niche and how that can make, everything else you do from all of your marketing initiatives more successful. And maybe you could even give us a little bit of advice on how to select that niche.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this question comes up so often, how to choose a niche, how to choose an ideal population and clientele. I think a lot of times therapists in general feel almost guilty or shameful in having to do so, saying like, I want to work with everyone. That's what I've been doing in my agency. I'm a generalist. Why can't I do that? And I want to talk about why that is really important to kind of be more selective in how we market and brand ourselves, because choosing a niche is how we brand and market our services. Because once you come into the private practice world, you're not only a helping professional, you're also a small business owner. So marketing, networking, all that stuff is really important. So what I would recommend doing is trying to think really hard about the population of clients that really excite you, really light your fire to be a helping professional and therapist. I kind of do this in my coaching course when we talk about who is your ideal clientele. And most of the time, the initial response is, well, I want to work with someone 15 to 55 who exhibits these qualities and traits or struggles with an eating disorder, etc. I want you to really think about being specific, concise, elaborating, and getting creative about that. So we want to be targeting a specific population so that your branding and your marketing feels concise. It feels like it lands for someone, so that when someone's looking for a therapist, they don't just see 100 people saying, I treat everything. It kind of makes you seem like you're like a restaurant that serves and cooks every meal in the world, and obviously you can't do it all well. This is how we also develop a referral network. Like, I want you to be referring to people who specialize in certain topics. So if someone calls you and says, I have an addiction to this and I'm struggling with this, and you don't really specialize in it, but maybe you took a course in college, I would be referring that person out to an addictions therapist who knows that world, because you're benefiting the client. You're also serving yourself. So we want to get really creative and specific with how we create our niches. We want to start thinking more so about, instead of modality and intervention and demographic, I want you to think about characteristics and traits of the clients that you really like working with. What are the characteristics, the traits, the daily processes that your clients experience and go through, so that when they find your website, they find your marketing, they find your landing page, they are like, wow, this person gets me. This person understands my world. Like, I don't want to see 20 therapist listing sites that say I work with everyone and every age and every demographic. It just doesn't feel specific enough, and the marketing falls a bit flat.
And I could not agree more with that, Patrick. A lot of times when people are thinking about opening a private practice, you have to consider that with the proliferation of the internet the past decade, people have so much information at their fingertips, and there's all of these communities that begin building on the internet. And there's a specific community for everyone, no matter what your interest is, talking even outside of the mental health sphere. If you are really interested in, model airplanes, you're really interested in car maintenance, or you're really interested in the environment. There's all of these communities that have formed, and taking that insight and transferring it to what you do with your private practice marketing can be really fundamental and really help you connect with your ideal type of client. Because, going off of what you had said, Patrick, people do business with those they know, like, and trust. And
Yep.
you're unable to establish that relationship if you aren't appealing to the specific needs of the specific clients you're seeing. And it's okay to have more than one type of specific client that you are seeing, but as long as you've defined the needs of each individual subset of that client, who you want to work with, you're going to be able to connect with them much more effectively.
That's really well said. And a lot of times people will follow up, like, why should I have a niche with? Well, what if I want to work with everybody? And that's exactly what we would do. Create a subset of your ideal clientele that's experiencing similar traits, processes, characteristics that someone with just generalized anxiety or depression is going to see that and say, oh, that sounds like me. That sounds like something I struggle with. And then you're going to get those people called too. You're going to get those referrals from people who are, a little bit more generalized. You're just marketing more specifically. It also sets you up to almost become an expert and do consultations, to do coaching, to do group work, to do webinars, to do conferences, to do retreats. It opens up this entire stream of revenue opposed to just seeing clients individually.
100%. And, and it can also be a phenomenal way to build that referral network. I think you had touched on that a little bit a little while ago, where if you do have a specific subset of people that you see, you can build relationships with other clinicians where they say, oh, hey, Sam, the therapist, I'm not an expert in this, but I know that my colleague Patrick is, so I'm going to start sending people his way, because he has a different area of specialty, and we can have this sort of relationship where we refer people back and forth to each other.
Absolutely. And that's a big thing that I like to talk about too, is reciprocal relationships and networking. So the recognition that people really get intimidated by networking. They feel really vulnerable putting themselves out there. They feel like a used car salesman. They feel sleazy. And in reality, what we're doing is not only are we building our network and referral base for ourselves, but for someone else. And we're also helping our client in the meantime, because we're making sure that they find the appropriate landing spot. I would really encourage y'all to be networking with not only local therapists in your area via a Facebook group or however that needs to happen right now, Zoom, coffee, whatever. I would really be talking about networking with psychiatric providers and therapists who are full, who see similar clientele.
And when you are thinking about networking, just because we're on the topic of, how do I get clients? I know that was, one of the big concerns that people had voiced. An easy way to sort of break down those barriers and make it more comfortable to start networking that I've seen is by providing good content. And a powerful way that you can, develop content is, it can be something simple. It can be a blog post. It could be a, free 5-step guide. And you can share this not only with your clients, but you can share it with other clinicians. So you can say, hey, I've written this blog post all about, manage or balancing work and home life when everybody is at home. And that's something
Right.
that can appeal specifically to what people are dealing with now. You could give that to a psychiatric provider in the area and say, hey, I produced this content. Maybe you want to share it with some of your patients. And that can sort of build that relationship from there, while also appealing on your website to people who are finding your website through an organic search or online.
Absolutely. And what I would even piggyback and follow up on that with is that if you're networking with a psychiatric provider and providing content and resource, I would also be asking them, I need a referral source for my clients who need medication management. That's creating this reciprocity of saying, like, I'm not just looking for clients. Like, I'm not just out here just like, give me, give me, give me. So having that relationship built so that you can talk with these psychiatric providers and say, hey, listen, I want to collaborate. I will get the releases of information signed. I will ensure that we communicate efficiently. And I'm going to send you clients because my clients are going to need medication management as well. So it kind of creates this reciprocal relationship where it's a two-way street. And it doesn't just feel like you're walking in the door and saying, hey, this is me, send me some folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it just makes everything, more sort of, more personal and just easier to, get things started right from the get-go. So, and we're happy to take more questions on, ways to attract more clients. If you have a specific question of something, maybe an initiative you're thinking of, and you're asking us, hey, how could I execute this? How could I, put this forth into the world? Feel free to put that in the chat. Happy to talk about specific things you might be doing or you might be interested in during the course of this webinar. So for our next topic, and we can always circle back around to this, but for our next bit of topic, something I wanted to talk about, Patrick, and a big part of the webinar today is barriers to leaving an agency. From speaking with clients over the years here at Bird Vision, I know that there's many clients who we've worked with that are just starting a private practice, and it's because they're moving away from an agency, they're moving into solo practice, and they're tasked with this seemingly overwhelming task of becoming their own boss and managing all of the parts of their business. So maybe if you wanted to talk about just what are some of these barriers that people might be facing, and if anybody has barriers that they have experienced and you want to put them in the chat, we're happy to speak to those specifically.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I talked for a while yesterday about barriers because they're so prevalent. We can find so many, but the most common that I think, like Jenny just said, it's so much to learn and figure out. When you're not a business-minded human being, when that's not your forte, going into your own business, it's like, oh wow, what do I do for taxes? What do I do for retirement, health insurance? How do I create a schedule that works for me? How do I market myself? Which technologies and platforms should I use? How do I develop my forms? How do I take money from people? It can start to feel really, really complicated. My agency job qualifies for public loan forgiveness. Yeah, loan forgiveness too is a great reason to try to stay around for an agency job. Really good health insurance that's affordable. That comes up a lot as a barrier. I want you to think about this, Stephanie, and anyone else that feels that way. I'd like you to think about how much comes out of your paycheck for health insurance right now versus how much do you make a year. I would imagine in private practice, you're going to almost double your income. So you're going to build in the cost of health insurance into your budget, knowing that you're going to be making significantly more money, but you will be paying more for health insurance. That just goes hand in hand, unfortunately. But the reality is the barriers, we can overcome these things. It's a lot of like, what I don't know, so it feels scary. Like CAQH stuff, MPI stuff. We start to get into the nitty gritty of like, in an agency world, we have individualized departments handling a lot of this stuff. Now it's all on you. That can feel really overwhelming. But that's why it's good to have good support, good mentorship, there's tons of good Facebook groups, there's tons of coaching programs and people who are doing this for a living. And yes, I see a lot of comments about insurance, private pay versus insurance. That's definitely something that feels like a challenge for a lot of people to determine, how do I make this decision?
And I loved your point about, looking for resources, Patrick. And I think, something that I might suggest to the audience if you are entering private practice is come up with a list of the big questions that you have. If your questions are taxes, insurance, budget management, come up with these questions and seek resources and seek advice for where you can find out about these things before you begin and as you're in the process of growing that practice, so that you have a business plan in place and okay, here's what I'm doing for insurance, here's how much I estimate it's going to cost, and then here's how many clients I need to see to be able to still, to be able to support myself and to be able to, make enough money so that I can also, continue to see clients and continue to help people.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big piece of this is that a lot of us go into this with a lot of unknowns and we almost try to do it all on our own. And then we get overwhelmed. And then it's like, well, this wasn't going to work anyway. It was never going to be successful. I really encourage you to find people who are willing to give away this advice or charge for it. I mean, but to have support systems in place. You're not an accountant, you're not an attorney. Like, ask those people. A lot of accountants give free consultations. I had one on my webinar the other day. Like, they are willing to help you. So just asking the right questions in the right places is really important.
Couldn't agree more. And I would actually refer people to some of the earlier webinars we've done. I've actually done, we did a webinar last week that was all about taxes that I can link in the chat, and finding good resources to be able to manage your taxes right from the get-go and create a budget right from the get-go. So I'll put that in the chat. You could also reach out to someone like Patrick, who specializes in coaching new private practice owners build their business.
And we go over all of this stuff. What I do in my first coaching course week is that we decide what our ideal private practice is. How much money are you making now? How much time off are you getting? Okay, most people will say, 40 to 50,000, 2 weeks off. That includes holidays and sick time. And I'm like, oh, like, let's try to think bigger. Like, what do we want out of life? Because private practice is about lifestyle. This isn't about making all the money in the world. It's about lifestyle change, more time with our families, more time to spend money on the things that we care about, more vacation time, working less hours. Those are things that we're working towards. And if you want to take 10 weeks off a year, all we're doing is saying, if you want to make $100,000 and you're going to do it in 42 weeks instead of 52, then we're just averaging that out. And then we're saying, okay, this is how many clients I need to see and at what rate. And that's how we determine what we're going to make. So it's a simple process. It just feels overwhelming when we have all of these unknowns that we're kind of looking at and balancing.
Step by step, right? Create a plan and then, calculate if, your plan is going to work, because, the last thing you would want to is, go into private practice and not be aware of what your estimated costs are going to be. So you, don't understand, what your revenue, or sorry, your take-home pay would be after all of the costs are subtracted. So we did have some specific questions and some really good ones, Patrick, that I think we can move into covering now. So
Sure.
Jamie had asked, would I just cold call other providers to network? So a question about networking based off of what we had mentioned earlier. Do you have any guidance on, the best strategy for outreach when you're building a referral network?
Definitely. That's a great question, Jamie, and it comes up a lot. So networking is going to definitely take some vulnerability on our parts, putting ourselves out there a little bit. But what I encourage everyone to do is try to find a local or regional specific group on Facebook or social media for therapists in your area. There probably is one. Most of the time, if it's not local, it's state specific. That is a great place where I encourage you to kind of write a little blurb about who you are, the clients that you work with, a link to your landing page or your website, and say, I'm taking new clients. I would love to get Zoom coffee or actual coffee, whichever works at this point in life right now. And I can't tell you how many people are going to jump at that opportunity, because you're not the only one that's experiencing the need to network and the vulnerability around it. So I do that with my coachees, and I have them get really comfortable putting themselves out there, because that's more than half the battle. And that's the same thing with psychiatric providers too. Now, in a pre-COVID world, you could certainly go into offices and introduce yourself and really talk to the admin assistant or the office assistant and drop some literature off. I don't see that being that successful very often unless you're in really small townships. They're just too busy and they don't have the time to really navigate that. So you really want to get the most information out there as quickly as possible, and also make it known that you want to get to know them too. It's not just about them getting to know you.
Love that advice. And, specifically on Facebook groups, I think, the state and national associations, the AMFTs, the APAs of the world, they can be great. They can provide a lot of good resources, but specifically zeroing into that Facebook groups, and that's why I love that recommendation, Patrick, can be extremely powerful because they're more specific, thinking about these ideas of specific communities. We actually just published a blog the other week all about therapist Facebook groups and some of our favorite groups that we've kind of stumbled upon over time. Would encourage you to check that out. I put a link to that in the chat. And yeah, seek out these groups where you can talk with other clinicians who are, in a similar area, going through similar things as you, and looking to, bounce ideas and refer clients back and forth. So don't underestimate the power of Facebook groups. It can be a phenomenal way and an easy way, a comfortable way to really network effectively.
Absolutely.
So some other questions here, and we'll kind of just run down the list.
Okay.
Melanie had asked, any ideas to target Medicare patients, so over 65 years old? Do you have any advice on that, Patrick?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this yesterday in terms of dealing with chronic pain patients too. You want to get really specific and creative about where you're targeting your networking then. So where are those people going to come in contact with the most in their daily lives? Is it going to be a dialysis center? Is it going to be a senior living home? Is it going to be for chronic pain, a massage therapist office or a physical therapist office? Things like that, places where people are going to be spending time so that you can get in front of the people who are going to be offering up referrals to these folks, because they're going to be talking about their lives. They're going to be talking about their struggles to those people. And then those people can say, oh, I know Melanie works with over 65-year-old clients. Call her. She's fantastic. And that's a really cool way to just kind of get in the door and be a part of their collaborative team too, so that you can be on the same page and offer wraparound care.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, Melanie, if you are, targeting Medicare patients, 65 years and older, that can be your niche. And then you have sort of these subsets of clients under that. So like you said, Patrick, if it's, people who are living in senior living homes, or it's chronic pain, think about those individual subsets below that and how you can speak directly to those needs. And this actually all ties along to your website and your online marketing. Is what you want to do is you want to be specific. So if you are developing a website and you offer all of these individual services to this older population, list out those services and also create content that specifically addresses that. Because what people are most of the time searching for when they are looking for a mental health provider is they are looking for answers to their questions. They want to know, hey, I am having this issue. Who can help me overcome this? And you want to get out in front of that and say, hey, I specialize in this. I've seen, I see patients with these specific issues and I want to help. And here's what I've done to help.
Absolutely. That's a great question and a good point, Sam.
And it looks like we just launched another poll as well. And this is actually a really interesting question that you had posed, Patrick, and that's how much do you pay for a massage in your city? So it looks like we have some answers, and I'll let you lead into why you might have answered or why you might have asked that question.
Rate setting is a thing that creates a lot of imposter syndrome for therapists and helping professionals. We act as if we don't deserve to be paid or nobody will pay for our services. I really want to show you how much value you are creating right now by answering that poll. Everyone is answering over $75 for a massage. The reason you pay that is because you value it. The reason you pay over $100 to get a massage is because there's value placed upon what that massage can do for you, your mental health, your physical health, your self-care, your pampering, whatever. That's what we're selling. And that's what we're selling in terms of private practice and mental health therapy, is the ability to create value behind what you're doing. And your master's level clinicians who are setting your rates, and I know how scary that feels to say, like, who's going to pay me? Like, how am I going to charge over $100 an hour, and who is going to pay me? But I think you're kind of answering that in that poll right now, knowing that people pay over $100 to get massages. And that's a really cool way to compare the two, because I would imagine most massage therapists, although they are very skilled, don't have the master's degrees that you have and all the hours of clinical experience that you have. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're starting to think about setting your rates.
And along the topic of setting your rates too, you have to think it's not, you are not pocketing the total fee for that session, whether you charge 100, 150, $200. There's a big chunk of that that's absorbed by the cost of even just keeping the doors open. So
Yeah.
factor that into setting the cost. And if you discover you have to raise your rates at a certain point to be able to sustain this private practice, it can be helpful to look at that as a good thing. As long as you approach that conversation about raising your rates from a perspective of empathizing with the clients that you are seeing and say, hey, cost of living has gone up. I've had to raise my rates a little bit to account for these additional costs in my practice. And as long as you're thinking about those things, it can make that much more comfortable to do, because ultimately, if you aren't able to cover your overhead costs and support your personal expenses, you're not able to continue helping people. And if you can't cover those costs, the doors have to shut, and that's the last thing that we want to happen. So, being
Absolutely.
mindful of those costs is really important.
And build your rate increases into your informed consent paperwork. That informed consent document is kind of your practice's backbone. You're going over all your policies, procedures, cancellation expectations, etc., how you're going to communicate HIPAA compliant through HIPAA compliance, rate raising, etc. So please make sure your informed consent is really on par and like really specific, and that you're going over it with clients in the initial consultation.
Fantastic advice. And Patrick, do you happen to have any resources, either now or we could maybe share later, about writing an informed consent?
I kind of asked a lot of therapists who were in private practice for their copies and if they were willing to share them, and then compared and contrasted and made it my own. I know Kate and Katie with the private practice startup sell tons of paperwork that they have had lawyers look over that are ready for you to just put your information into and your business name into. I'd really recommend their stuff. It's top notch and it protects you. There are some upfront costs with starting this business, but it's going to save you a lot of hassle in the long run, because I know a lot of therapists who just kind of wing it, use their Yahoo, use their Hotmail, personal phones, make up their forms. Like, just protect yourself so that you're covering your butts and also protecting your clients too.
Yes, absolutely. And I couldn't recommend the resources that Kate and Katie put out highly enough. I'm going to put a link to their attorney-approved paperwork in the chat. They have been a fantastic resource for Brighter Vision clients over the years. So really thank you for recommending that. That's a very, very good point. So moving down the list to some other questions. And I know we had a couple questions about private pay. So Mari had asked, I'm concerned with the difficulty of learning how to bill insurances and whether or not I should even think about being paneled or just do self-pay practice. So do you have any insight on that, Patrick, that sort of balance of insurance billing versus private pay?
Yes. I think that if you ask most therapists in private practice that take health insurance, would you do this again? The answer would probably not be yes. It's just a lot of headache. But at the end of the day, it also increases accessibility. So you're kind of balancing both of like, I know I take Blue Cross and Aetna, and I have clients who have $5 copays, and that works wonderfully for them. And I'm glad to be able to do it. But it took a lot of headache to learn how to bill appropriately, document appropriately, and go through the credentialing and paneling process. It's not impossible by any means. I mean, I do my billing within less than a minute at this point in time. It's just a process that's going to be a little bit of a difficult transition to just jump into. That's where I would recommend like consulting with a biller who does that professionally, consulting with other therapists in your area who already have that process honed in on, so that they can maybe walk you through the steps. Because just trying to credential and panel yourself, it's possible, but it's also a lot of headache. And I don't know if you really want to, it's up to you whether you want to go down that path. Now, in terms of private pay, it gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility on how you approach therapy. You can do walk and talk therapy, you can do remote therapy, like you can get really creative in your approach, and you're not really mandated by the insurance company to operate a certain way. Obviously, the rates are your own, and you can create as many sliding scale slots as you want and as many high fee slots as you want, and pro bono slots as well. You can create your cancellation policies around that. It's so much easier. Your note taking and documentation will be so much easier. And in order to combat that too, you can offer out of network super bills for your clients to present to their insurance panels and say, this could potentially, I really want to emphasize potentially, get you reimbursement from your insurance company.
Yeah, and along the lines of insurance, something that I've seen work for specifically newer private practices in the past is start out getting, paneled maybe with a insurance or two, but then have a plan of how you might be able to transition away from that over time. Because, working with an insurance, with an insurance company and being paneled can be a great way to sort of launch your private practice and get yourself off the ground, build some recognition with clients, and then move into private pay as time goes on. If you are looking at, doing insurance and say, hey, I don't know the first step of doing this, I would strongly agree with Patrick's advice is find somebody who's a resource for that. We actually do have a webinar next week all about insurance and billing with Greenpoint Med, who does offer that service. I put a link to their website. There are a number of other insurance and billing organizations out there that can help, but that's the one that comes to mind just off the top of my head because we have a webinar with Justin Gaines next week, who's the owner of that organization.
Nice. I can't recommend that enough, just having that resource, because if you get contracted with the insurance company and you don't understand the contract and you're billing just freely and just wildly, it can come back and bite you, and you just want to protect yourself, but it will bring clients in. So it is a balancing act. It's kind of something you have to come to terms with.
And along the lines of private pay, we had another question from Jenny that was, from Sally, that she'd asked how to attract private pay clients. What would you say some of your top strategies for attracting private pay clients are, Patrick?
The 3 top strategies that I think attract private pay clients. Number 1 is a niche, a really specific, clear niche of like, this is who I serve, this is who I work with, these are the reasons I do it, this is my expertise, these are all the things I love about it. You're going to attract so many more private pay clients that fall into that umbrella. Networking, and good SEO on your website. You want to be found in Google searches. Like, you want to be one of the top websites showing up when someone Googles therapist in my area, because you're going to get more clicks, you're going to get more referrals, you're going to get more calls. I really believe that the niche part is the most important, like really knowing who you work with, really being specific and clear about that. And on a subset to that, being really confident in stating your rates. I know a lot of therapists that when I get a phone call, they answer and say, yeah, I have openings. My rate is $150 an hour, but I have a sliding scale of this amount to this amount. I did that many times and they didn't even ask me for it. I was just like, it just came out of my mouth where I was like, my rate is this, but I have this. And they're like, yeah, I'll take that.
And with that, when we're talking about private pay, I completely agree with you. That is the most important first step, is develop your niche, because it's really going to guide the rest of your marketing initiatives. A question that we ask sometimes on our podcast, The Therapist Experience, is, if you moved to a new city and you had $100 in your pocket to start your private practice, what would be your marketing efforts? And I'm going to flip that question on its head. Normally, we're asking clinicians this, but I'm going to tell you what I would do personally if I had $100 and I was launching my private practice. The first thing, the 2 things that I would do is I would get a professionally built website with search engine optimization, and I would get a Psychology Today listing. Those 2 things you can do for under $100. Psychology Today is about $30 a month. A website, you can go with a do-it-yourself option if you're comfortable building and spending those hours building a website on your own with like a Wix, a Weebly, or a Squarespace. Or you could also use a solution like Brighter Vision, where we're $59 a month and we take care of that search engine optimization for you. Those would personally be my 2 things from the marketing side if I just had $100 in my pocket and I was ready to launch. Do you have any Any other ideas, Patrick? If you had just $100, what would you do?
It's a great question. I like your answer specifically because people do not underestimate the power of a Google search. Like, really try to think about in this day and age how someone is going to find you. A lot of people anticipate, like, I'm just going to open my business, I'm going to put my Psychology Today listing out there, I'm going to put my shingle out, and clients are just going to roll in. Maybe that happens like 1% of the time, but you really need a good way to funnel clients to you. They need to be able to find you. So I do agree that a good website with SEO is probably the most important strategy. And then after that, it is really networking with your content that you've built. You can build free content. And you can also make sure that you're networking for free or for coffee or for whatever. And that's a great way to get those referrals streaming in.
And I just actually thought of another thing that you can do actually totally for free. And that's a Google My Business listing.
Yep.
Google My Business, if you're not familiar, is basically if you type in a search for a business, it appears oftentimes on the right side of your screen. It's a listing with the location of that business, the phone number, the link to the website. We have a guide to set up optimizing a Google My Business and setting that up. When you're looking at, and both Patrick and I had mentioned sort of these digital marketing initiatives that you can take on. I would say for the time being, especially if you are an only telehealth provider, don't even waste your time creating brochures and creating business cards even for yourself, because that's just a sunk cost. Nobody's finding you like that right now because
No.
we're not doing things in person anymore.
That's very true. That's a great point. And honestly, like, even when we were doing things in person, I don't think those things really work that well anyway. So that I agree wholeheartedly.
And Pragya had a question. Google My Business requires a location, but what to do in case I only have an online therapy practice? So they've actually updated Google My Business where you can set a service area as opposed to a specific location, which is a really great addition by Google, because you can set it to either the state you're licensed in or multiple states.
That's, yeah, absolutely. And a lot, Google is going to optimize your location. I know a lot of therapists don't want to use their home location. If that's your home office, you're maybe thinking about getting an iPostal or a post office box or a UPS box. Google doesn't optimize those locations very well. It's a lot harder to be found with those. And also, some insurance companies will shut you down from credentialing once they realize that you don't have an actual office address. I know people don't want to use their home addresses, but like, most of you probably have voted or have a mortgage or have something linked to your name. And if I Google your name, probably going to find it. And you're not going to be giving your clients your home address information anyway.
And Melanie, to answer your question about Google My Business, so they require you sign up for it through a Gmail account, but they don't mandate that you're using that Gmail account for your business communication. That's simply a method to sign up for it. If you were really wanting to make that totally HIPAA compliant and use that Gmail account, Google actually does offer a business associates agreement that you can sign with them. It's an extra cost. It's not free like the standard Gmail account is, but there is an option for that.
Yep.
So, and I know we had a couple of questions about Google Ads, and I'll just kind of address that quickly. So Google Ads and what Patrick and I have been talking about are very different from search engine optimization. Search engine optimization is free if you know how to do it. So if you've developed your own website, you can write search engine optimization all on your own, or there's many options to do that, affordably, to write that standard search engine optimization. We do it here at Brighter Vision for all of our customers. With Google Ads, that's very different, because what you're basically doing with Google Ads is you are paying a certain amount to have your website or your listing shown. Google Ads can get very expensive very quickly. If you are looking to really scale up your practice and have the budget of, I would say $200 to $500 a month and can invest in Google Ads, my number one suggestion is don't try and do it on your own. Hire a professional if you do have the budget for Google Ads. just because it can very easily be a money pit, and you can sink a lot of money into Google Ads without seeing the return. So hire a professional. We work a lot with Dan Wendler, who operates a company called Marketing for Therapists, and he is a consultant for that. I'll put his link in the chat.
That's a really great piece of advice. Don't try to do it on your own. Please outsource some of this stuff. I know we want to keep overhead low when we're starting a business, but there are going to be some costs, and it feels a lot better to spend the money and see the return than to spend the money and just throw it away. Especially when
agree more. Oh, sorry. You go ahead. I was just saying I agree.
Yeah, I just want to encourage you. I know money is important, and I know it's, coming out of an agency, it can feel really like scary to spend it, especially when you're like, I don't have it coming in, but I would much rather spend it appropriately so that I can help navigate all of these obstacles and barriers than bury my head in the sand and get overwhelmed and give up.
And Patrick, Kelly had a great question that goes a little bit off what we had discussed earlier about rates. But Kelly's question is, how do you suggest closing the gap in rates for clients who came in on my lowest sliding scale, and having that gradually increase?
It's a great question. I've had that happen to myself. When I left my agency, I just took everyone and anyone at any rate. And I started to get really resentful. Like, my clients at my low slots would tell me about their new Mercedes they just bought. And I was like, oh man, I'm charging you $30. So you can have these questions professionally and appropriately. And it's good modeling behavior for our clientele too, to create value for the service that you're providing them. So I would start out by saying, hey, I know that this is my rate, but we're going to be moving and increasing our rates within the next 30 to 60 days. I just wanted to let you know what those rates will be and go over those options for you so that it doesn't feel like your rates are all over the place and so scattered. Like, yeah, Kelly, exactly. Your rate's 170, but you have clients between 50 and 100. I would really be raising those at least $20 each. $20 each feels like a pretty acceptable range at first to kind of start moving that. And I would say, I'm going to be having a rate increase every year. We kind of, because of cost of living, because of cost of doing business, because of my ongoing training, my ongoing my ongoing continuing education to make sure I'm providing you the best service that I can and ensuring that, that's the way I would do it. But I wouldn't do it immediately. I would definitely have it like 30 or 60 days. This is what's going to happen. And if those clients decide, you know what, I can't afford that, have some referrals ready. And give those clients referrals, because that's just going to open up space for you to take more clients at $170.
Some advice that was recently shared with me too, along the lines of sliding scale and what clinicians can do, is if you list your rate on the practice and someone says, hey, this seems expensive, what you can always do is say, hey, okay, here is what we'll do. We'll give you a sort of introductory rate. And if you find the value and you'd like to continue working with me, here's what the rate will go up to after you see the value. And that's one thing that I've seen specifically in private pay that can be successful.
Yep, absolutely.
And just going through some other questions. So a question that Jose had asked, maybe I'll start by answering this one, and then Patrick, you can jump in with your additional advices. Jose asked, what are good options for putting out content when you don't have time to create the content? So with this, there's a number of options. One thing that people don't think about is if they are, if you find that, your subset of clients is spending a lot of time on Facebook, what you can do is you can start a Facebook page for your business for free. Make sure that's separate from your private account. Don't market your therapy services on a private account, but you can start posting on Facebook and put helpful articles that are pulled from other sources. That is something that's always okay, as long as you're giving proper attribution. If it's an article from the New York Times or from the Washington Post, you can post those articles as long as they're relevant and they're going to provide value to your customers or to your potential clients. You can post those on your business Facebook page and share those. We also have an option at Brighter Vision called Social Genie that does automated blog posting, automated social media posting. If you'd like to try that out, we offer a 14-day free trial for anyone who just wants to check that out and see the content in there. That allows you to completely automate your social media by having you select relevant articles, relevant posts that are going to appeal to your audience. So other than that, Patrick, what other suggestions do you have about producing content when you don't have time, or marketing when you don't have time?
I love that social genie option.
Yeah, we'd love to have you try it out too if you're interested.
Cool. So I think that you can also hire a virtual assistant. You can hire someone to do it for you. You can find virtual assistants that charge between $15 and $20 an hour. Have them dedicate themselves to posting Instagram and Facebook posts. Have them dedicated to making your Facebook page look a little bit better or a little bit more visually appealing, like linking things together so they flow smoothly. There are ways to do it. You could also just dedicate one day to creating content, put it on something like Buffer or SocialBee, load it all for the week and just schedule it to post so that it does it automatically. You don't have to go back and do it. So that's just something to think about as well.
Love that. Yeah, the power of virtual assistants, I think, is something that people can overlook. There's a lot of affordable options out there for hiring a virtual assistant to, do some of these things for you. And also, while we're talking about time, something, Jose, you can look at is, okay, you don't have time to produce content right now, but you'd like to produce content that's specific to your business so you can network, so you can build a newsletter list, all of that stuff. And what I would ask you to think about is, are there other parts of your business that you could maybe hand off to free up time to do some of these things on your own? Looking at how you're prioritizing the things that you're doing in the practice. Maybe you're spending, 5-10 hours a week, working with the insurance agencies. Okay, could you move to private pay? Could you work with an agency to take care of your billing for you? And think about the time that you're spending doing those things that you might be able to free up for other things that you'd like to take on yourself.
Your time is your most valuable currency. I mean, in small business ownership, your time is so important. And that's such a great piece of advice from Sam. Like, outsourcing when you don't have the time, moving things out of your way or out of your schedule so that you can focus more on building your business and the things that you really enjoy doing. And if you don't enjoy doing certain things, don't do them. Don't spend energy doing the things that you don't enjoy doing. Like, if you hate blogging, don't blog. Don't force it. Put that energy somewhere else that feels really useful.
I could not agree more. And yeah, it's just, with that, you're going to find the most success in the things that you enjoy doing, the things that you find value doing on your own, things that you are forcing yourself to do that, you feel like you have to do it. They ultimately aren't going to, result in a positive net benefit. So, yeah, time is your most valuable currency. I couldn't agree more there. So we have about 5 minutes left here, and would love to answer any kind of final questions that anyone in the audience has, or questions that we might have not got to. Feel free to put those in the chat and we will go ahead and answer away. I know we had a question about non-competes. Any strategies for managing a non-compete if somebody's transitioning away from an agency, Patrick? That's not my area of expertise, but I think you might have some advice for that.
So, yeah, that's a good question. It happens a lot. It happens a lot more with group practices than with agencies. But with with agency work, it's really specific to the agency, and it's an HR policy. So more than likely, it would be in your handbook. It would be in your initial contract that you probably don't have anymore, because I know I wouldn't. It becomes a really sticky situation when you start to decide, do I want to move towards private practice and build it while I'm working at my agency without disclosing that to them? So that's something I work on with people in my course is how to appropriately take the leap, not burn bridges, make sure that things are taken care of appropriately and professionally. You really want to be able to have those conversations so that you don't feel like you're doing so in secret or in shame, or like you can't promote yourself because someone might see it. That's definitely something that comes up a lot.
Yep, Absolutely. So I think we might have gotten to all of our final questions here. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This was awesome. Thank you, Patrick, so much for sharing all of your expert advice. As a
Thanks for
reminder, we'd love to have you enter the giveaway that Patrick is offering this week, as well as take advantage of his courses that he's doing later here in September, and you'll get $200 off for that. We'll send a link to all of this information, all of the resources that we mentioned in a follow-up email, as well as the recording if you'd like to view this in the future. But before we do that, and before we close things out here, we did get another question that I'd love to answer. I think it's a really good one from Rianne. That is, how do we balance self-disclosure while marketing to feel relatable to clients? Any suggestions for that, Patrick? Balancing maybe the marketing that you're doing with self-disclosure and not kind of crossing any lines.
Yep, absolutely. So I think there's it's beaten into us that in your agency and graduate school that you shouldn't self-disclose, that it's just not something that therapists do. It almost comes off as if we're not human beings and we don't also experience life. And self-disclosure, I'm obviously with the intention of saying like, I understand this process, or I've gotten through difficult things before, or I can be relatable. That's really important in small business ownership, because once again, you're not just a therapist, you're a small business owner. So we're not just disclosing just for the fact, like, I want to just tell you about my life. That's not the point. But what you want to do is you want to be able to be relatable. You want someone to be able to find you and be like, oh, they kind of get me because they know my world, or they understand what it's like to have these challenges or these obstacles and move through them. I can't tell you how often, like, I work with a lot of addiction, and that seems very much more prevalent in the addiction world for clients to want to know, are you in recovery? Have you gone through this before? Do you know what I'm talking about? But needless to say, you want to have your marketing reflect you as a human being with your personality. You don't want to just come across as like this robotic, sterile professional that gives the image of like sitting there, typing notes, nodding your head, going, mm-hmm, while you're doing therapy. Like you are a human, and relatability and normalization is a rapport building technique. So just be mindful that you're not disclosing your life story, but you want to come across as relatable and someone who understands the human process and has empathy in that way.
Couldn't agree more. And a final kind of thing that I'll tag onto that is, a clinician told me a while back after one of our webinars that she doesn't put anything on her website that she wouldn't feel comfortable disclosing in the therapy session.
Exactly.
So if she wasn't able to disclose that in the therapy session, she wouldn't disclose it on the website or in any marketing. I think that's a great balance. But it is, at the heart of it, all about, making a connection with people and having them know, like, and trust you, and knowing a little bit about yourself personally can really help with that.
Definitely. Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate this. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, and it was so awesome to have you. This was great. And thank you, everyone in the audience, for all of your questions. This was one of the best Fall into Cash webinars we've done so far, just from the sheer amount of questions that we were receiving. And Patrick, can't thank you enough for lending your advice. Make sure to enter Patrick's giveaway. Check out the courses that he's doing. But yeah, Patrick, any things you'd like to close us out on here before we tune off for the day?
I just really want to say thank you for having me, and thank you for participating and asking questions. I know it's the middle of your day. I understand where you've been, y'all. Like, I've been at that ledge kind of looking over, feeling like I am so burnt out and just done with this world that I don't even want to be a therapist anymore. And I can't tell you how energizing it was to start a private practice, be going to my office on my own terms, on my own hours, charge my own rates, see my own clients, approve my own PTO requests. Like, it's just so liberating. And you can do it. You can absolutely do it. And the biggest barrier is going to be you. If anyone wants to talk more about that, that's what my coaching course is about. It's a 6-week course that takes you through the nitty-gritty stuff that's kind of boring, but we need to get through. And then the experiential process of learning how to deal with the emotions that come up with setting rates, imposter syndrome, networking and marketing, abundance mentality, all of that stuff. So I just really encourage you to bet on yourself and take the leap, because I wish I had done it so much sooner. I really do.
That's perfect. And I think that is just the perfect way to close out today. Thanks again, Patrick. Hope everyone has a great rest of their week. We will send a recording of this webinar later for you to view after the fact, as well as a list of all of the resources. Until then, be on the lookout for our other Fall into Cash webinars that we're doing the rest of the month. We have a total of 10 webinars this month, so there's plenty more opportunities for these live events and for you to register for them. But until then, everyone take care, stay safe, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.